Good afternoon. I'm Professor Darrell Jackson, and this module will be corporations. Protection from personal liability in business dealings. Is that a fact or a fiction? We'll explore that in corporations. Overview of this module. A corporation is an organization formed with state government approval to act as an artificial person to carry out business or other activities. It can sue or be sued, and unless it's a nonprofit, can issue shares of stock to raise funds with which to start a business or increase its capital. An artificial person, we'll be talking about that a little bit later in the lecture, but an artificial person, in other words, whatever a natural person, which is being a human being, can do, an artificial person, such as a corporation, can do, and for the most part. Each corporation are subject to state regulations. States regulate the formation of corporations. Most states have a general corporation code which lists certain requirements, and any person that satisfies those requirements and files the necessary paperwork can form a corporation under that state's government and automatically can become a corporation. So you can get together as long as you meet those specific requirements per that particular state. You file the actual paperwork and come up with the filing fee. You are then incorporated. Formalities. One or more natural persons may act as incorporators of a corporation by signing and filing the articles of incorporation with the proper state government office. Usually, the proper state government office is the Secretary of State. So an incorporator, it can be one or more persons, but the incorporator is the person who actually goes and files this paperwork with the state to become a corporation. A natural person is an incorporator. The articles of incorporation must contain several strict formalities. The following must be in the articles of incorporation. The name of the incorporation must be in the corporate filing, filed in the corporate papers. Name the number of shares to be issued, if any. You don't have to issue shares in most states, but if you do, that must be specified in the corporation, in the corporate paperwork rather. The street address, no P.O. boxes. The physical address of the corporation, initial office, and the name of his initial registered agent. What is the registered agent? The registered agent is the individual who the corporation is sued or can sue through, and that is the person who gets all of the corporate paperwork for that particular corporation. So if there's any official paperwork that is sent by the state or by any other legal entity seeking to take legal action against the corporation, or through the corporation, it goes through the registered agent. The name and address of each of the incorporators must also be included. So if there's one or more individuals who say, we're going to get together, we're going to form this corporation, those individuals are called the incorporators. They must also, it is mandatory that they are put into the filed paperwork. It may contain some of the following. The optional provisions such as the purpose of the corporation. It is not mandatory. You can form a corporation. If you don't put that in your paperwork, the purpose of the organization, then it is considered to be for any legal purpose. That is a general umbrella statement for corporations. If you don't say, well, the purposes of this corporation is to sell widgets, then if you leave the purpose statement out, it will be for any legal purpose that you can form a corporation for. If no reference is made to the duration of the corporation is said to be perpetual, which means it will be for an indefinite period of time until some other action is taken by the individuals who own the corporation, then it will be perpetual. So you don't have to say, well, this corporation is set up until the year 2020. It will be, if you don't put anything in there absent that, the duration of the corporation will be said to be perpetual. Corporate existence begins when? When the articles of incorporation are filed. When they're filed that day, that moment that you are now incorporated. The reason why that it needs to be expressed is because it used to be when the Secretary of State would issue the actual certificate of incorporation, which could, in some cases, could have been several days or maybe weeks. So imagine you walk in today, have the proper paperwork, have the proper filing fee. As soon as you file that, you are incorporated and may begin doing business under that particular corporate name. Ownership and governance. Shareholders are the owners of the corporation. Shareholders elect a board of directors to oversee and manage the corporation. The board elects the officers. Now, the board of directors are the managers. The officers and the employees carry out the day-to-day operation of the corporation. All right, the daily dealings are carried out by the officers, the employees of the corporation, under the delegated authority of the board. Each director must attend the meetings of the board, and each corporation should at least have one annual meeting, at least one. Most corporations, the bigger ones, have a quarterly meeting, but you should at least have one yearly meeting to stay in compliance with state regulations. All actions of the corporation's board rather, should be recorded in the minutes. Any official actions taken by that board should be recorded in minutes for posterity. Particularly when you're talking about the IRS and some of, if you are to be audited or what have you. You never know when you may be audited. So the minutes will prove up what you've been doing, how you did it, and what have you. So that's a protection for you. Corporate officers are elected by the board of directors. They conduct the day-to-day operational activities of the corporation. Officer positions typically consist of a president, a vice president, secretary, and treasurer. Officers can also hold more than one position. So in other words, you might be vice president and secretary, you might be president and treasurer, so on and so forth. The bylaws, the Bible for your corporation. The bylaws are the internal rules and guidelines for the day-to-day operation of the corporation. The bylaws state when and where the corporation will hold directors and shareholders meetings. Very, very important. These are your day-to-day blue book for how you are going to, or guidebook for how the corporation is going to deal with certain things as contracts, how it is going to deal with certain elections, voting privileges, rights and duties of the shareholders, the board members, and the directors. It also can outline how you enter into contracts, transfer shares, hold meetings, pay dividends, and to make amendments to the actual corporate documents. Also, it should identify the fiscal year of the corporation. Now, why is that important? Some people go on the calendar year, or a fiscal year could be, it could be a calendar year, or it could be any portion of the year. It could be from June to July, or June to June, or so forth. A lot of corporations start October 1. So it needs to outline that, and it needs to be, and that also dictates when you'll have your annual meeting. If you only have one, you need to have it within that fiscal year also. Domicile of corporations. Domestic corporation or corporation incorporated in a particular state. That's pretty straightforward. If you incorporate in the state of Texas, then if you're incorporated in that state, you are a domestic corporation as far as Texas is concerned. Foreign corporations, however, they're incorporated in a state, but they're also doing business in this particular state. So if you were doing business in Texas but not incorporated in Texas, you are a foreign corporation with respect to Texas, using this example. So you can have many states that you do business in, and you can also actually incorporate in more than one state too. But typically, you have to file, you become a foreign corporation. If you're not actually incorporated in that state, you need to file a foreign corporation certificate and the paperwork surrounding that for that particular state. that you're simply doing business in, but not incorporated in. Other types of corporations that of some note. A close corporation, not closed, but close. Shares are held by single shareholders or a closely knit group of shareholders. The first one that comes to mind is a family, would be a close corporation. They are not interested in going public or trading public shares. They're going to keep all the shares, if they issued any, within the family. A professional corporation, our next type. Corporations are organized for the business of conducting professional services or providing professional services, such as physicians, attorneys, engineers, CPAs, usually designated as PC. PC means professional corporation, or they may be designated as a PA, a professional association. Our next type is a nonprofit. Nonprofits do not issue shares, but they are a corporation that are organized for charitable or benevolent purposes. Examples include certain hospitals, universities, churches, and religious organizations. Generally, they have a board of directors or they have a board of trustees, particularly universities. Subchapter S. Shareholders elected and they are treated as partners for the sake of tax purposes. Shareholders will have limited liability protection of a corporation, but income is treated like a partnership. Subchapter S refers to a particular subsection in the IRS code, Subchapter S. Illegal and unethical corporate activities. This is where we get into some discussion about the Ultra Vires Acts. Ordinarily, a corporation will be regarded and treated as a separate legal entity from its owners. Piercing the corporate veil means that you've gone outside the realm of what the corporation is meant to do, and you've done something that is illegal or unethical or both. And some typical examples of that would be failure to maintain adequate corporate records, and commingling corporate funds with personal funds. Grossly inadequate capitalization. In other words, your debt to equity ratio is too high. Another way is formation of a corporation to perpetuate a fraud. In other words, you set up this corporation, it was but a shell to do whatever, to run whatever illegal activity you were engaged in through the corporation, thinking that it would protect your personal assets. That is not the case. Whenever you're talking about piercing the corporate veil, you're talking about petitioning the court to say, look, Your Honor, we need to get to the personal assets of this company because they're hiding behind this corporation and not letting us get to their personal assets. You might be a multimillionaire, billionaire, and have a shell corporation say, well, you know, yes, I've been doing this illegal activity, but this is a corporate activity. You can't get to my personal assets. Nothing could be further from the truth. Petition the court and either get civil charges, bring civil charges against this individual, or if it warrants, criminal charges against the corporate owners of the so-called corporation. Improper conversion of corporate assets, you're stealing or commingling that type of individual with your personal assets, you know, just make money laundering and right straight to your personal bank account. Those are the type of things that piercing the corporate veil will go around. In other words, the veil of corporate security, we're going to pierce that and go directly at the owners. Injustice and inequitable circumstances would result if the corporate entity was recognized. In other words, it is such a fraudulent shell of a corporation, if we were to even recognize this, it would be an injustice to so many different people. Again, I allude to the Bernie Madoff type situation, where you're running one enterprise, a criminal enterprise, through a corporation, and many people are suffering because of that. So the court will not let, or the law will not let, this individual or individuals hide behind the corporate veil of secrecy or in protection. Miscellaneous corporate provisions that are of note. For the purpose of bringing lawsuits, corporations are considered a citizen. And of course, we know they can't be a natural citizen, but this is an artificial person of the state where incorporated in its principal place of business. A corporation can also be a citizen of more than one state. Remember that they're doing business in several different states, so this is particularly important when you're talking about federal diversity for a federal lawsuit. Because federal diversity, if you have citizens of different states, they have diversity statutes that cover where the lawsuit should be maintained or where you can file the lawsuit. A merger. A merger is when a corporation absorbs another corporation, and the remaining corporation incurs its debts, liability, and identity of the former corporation. All right, as opposed to an acquisition where, when you have a corporation that acquires another company, all they do, they don't acquire the liabilities of that company. They simply acquire pretty much the good portions of it, the profit, and purchase the assets of another company. No obligations are absorbed. And finally, a holding company is usually a corporation created to own the stock of another corporation, often using stock holdings to control the management and policies of the other corporation that is holding them for. Imagine the power of just having a conglomerate there and using their stock to get bigger and bigger and holding that stock and leveraging that for whatever capital needs that that company may need and what have you. So that's a holding company or a holding corporation. In conclusion, a corporation is a legal form of business that creates a separate legal entity for the individual owners. This entity can act and do business on its own, just as a natural person could do. You're talking about an artificial person in a corporation as opposed to a natural person. But whatever a natural person could do, such as borrow money, enter in lawsuits and contracts, this is what an artificial person, the corporation, can do. What are some of the advantages? The advantage: shareholders are not personally liable, technically speaking. Ownership is easily exchanged between individuals. Corporation does not cease to exist with the death of any of the members. They provide for that in the bylaws as to how it will go on if anybody was to die within the corporation. It's an easy structure for which to raise money. Out of all the structures we've talked about, the sole proprietorship, the LLC, or the corporation, corporate entity, simply because it has so many other state regulations that are so formal, it would be easier for you to acquire money or capital because of the corporate entity, because they think that our bank or a lending institution would think that you have much more invested in the corporate structure. Disadvantages would include owners are taxed twice, and by twice we mean the corporate income taxes and the individual income taxes for the owners. Potentially high administrative costs and setup and cost to run. When you're, like I said, it takes much more thought, much more planning to begin a corporation, and it's also probably going to cost you much more seed money in getting tax professionals or your legal professional to advise you on how you need to start up your corporation. And there are more regulatory requirements than any other structures. No other structure is regulated by the state more than corporations, not LLCs and certainly not sole proprietors. If you desire more additional resources or information about any of this lecture, please consult LexisNexis, Black's Law Dictionary, FindLaw.com, LawInfo.com, or Westlaw. My name is Professor Darrell Jackson. I'm a graduate of Grambling State University, Political Science, and also Southern University Law Center, and hold a Juris Doctorate from Southern University Law Center. Thank you. It's been a pleasure lecturing. Thank you.